This audio slideshow has been created for Victorian museums who are custodians of shipwreck artefacts. It explains the legislation that protects shipwrecks and provides guidance on collection management for shipwreck objects in museums. Shipwrecks are an important part of Australian heritage. Not only are they evidence of a usually tragic event, they can also offer glimpses into all aspects of our past. Shipwrecks and their associated artefacts are a finite resource that hold a wealth of information, and as keepers of heritage, museums have a responsibility to care for and preserve this finite resource in their collection. The first Australian shipwreck was the Trial, which ran into the West Australian coast in 1622. Since then, thousands of ships have come to grief on Australian shores or in our treacherous waters. The introduction of the aqualung in the 1950s provided easy and relatively affordable equipment to allow members of the public to explore the underwater world. Numerous ship's bells, portholes and bottles disappeared from shipwreck sites and reappeared on mantelpieces as souvenirs of divers' exploits, creating concern that this was not the correct way to treat Australian maritime heritage. The end result was the introduction of the Commonwealth Historic Shipwrecks Act in 1976. The legislation made it illegal to disturb or remove any part of the wreck or any artefact associated with it. Over the next few years, a system of state and Commonwealth legislation was enacted to protect shipwrecks. While this was revolutionary in the world of protecting underwater heritage, there was still the problem that shipwrecks had to be located and declared before they were covered by the legislation. This issue was resolved in 1993 when legislation was changed to provide blanket protection to all shipwrecks 75 years or older, whether or not they had been located. Also in 1993, an amnesty was held allowing all people who had artefacts from shipwrecks older than 75 years to declare them to the state and Commonwealth governments with no charges laid. Such was the success of the amnesty in bringing shipwreck artefacts out into the open that the state institutions could not house them all. Therefore, the original owners were given custodianship of the shipwreck artefacts and allowed to keep them. In Victoria, there are two pieces of legislation protecting shipwrecks and their associated artefacts. The Historic Shipwrecks Act 1976 covers shipwrecks in Commonwealth waters, which for this act is from the low water mark to the continental shelf. The Victorian Heritage Act 1995 protects shipwrecks in state waters, which covers enclosed waters such as Port Phillip, Yarra River and Western Port. The major aims of both acts is to protect all shipwrecks and their artefacts that have been in Victorian waters for 75 years or more, whether or not their existence or location is known. The legislation also allows for shipwrecks and artefacts less than 75 years old to be protected if they are deemed especially significant or at risk. The Act prohibits the removal of artefacts from shipwrecks and the buying, selling, exchanging or disposing of shipwreck artefacts without a permit. While the legislation aims to protect shipwrecks, it still allows divers to visit shipwreck sites for recreational purposes as long as they look but don't touch, unless the wrecks are within protected zones. The Acts also require a person who finds a shipwreck or artefact to notify the relevant state or Commonwealth body as soon as practicable. The Crown controls all historic shipwreck artefacts through the protective legislation and can give directions in relation to custody of historic shipwreck artefacts. It is possible for private people and museums to be custodians of shipwreck artefacts but not owners. A custodian has a responsibility to keep and protect artefacts in their care and cannot sell or tamper with them, and also has a responsibility to conserve artefacts and prevent them from deterioration. It is not uncommon for uncatalogued shipwreck artefacts to turn up in the back of museum cupboards and storage sheds. Alternately, sometimes research can reveal that an artefact that has been in the collection for some time originally came from a shipwreck. And as the legislation has a rolling date of 75 years, there will be shipwreck items in museum collections that will become historic over time. If this situation occurs, ensure that the item is appropriately catalogued in the museum database and then immediately complete a REC notification form from Heritage Victoria. If a member of the public offers to donate a shipwreck artefact to your museum, there are legal ramifications for accepting and possessing historic shipwreck artefacts without a permit. It is best to collect the contact details of the donor and pass them on to Heritage Victoria to pursue. However, if the donor is unwilling to leave details and there is the chance that the artefact will disappear or be destroyed, it is best to take temporary responsibility for the artefacts and immediately report them to Heritage Victoria. Make sure to record as much information as you can about where the artefact is from, relevant dates and people connected with the artefact. Even record vague details and family stories about the artefact, as these can be verified later. To improve the collection management of shipwreck artefacts, the Museum Committee should consider adding a clause to the collection policy. An example clause is shown on the screen. As a general rule, it is best to report any shipwreck artefacts in the collection to Heritage Victoria, as it is a legal requirement to report the location of all shipwrecks and their associated artefacts, no matter their age. Incorporating this information into collection management practices will ensure that shipwreck artefacts within the museum collection are cared for appropriately. See the fact sheet for more information.